This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, an online learning community. Do you ever worry if you're doing research and prospect management correctly? At the Institute, we turn researchers into fundraising intelligence assets, leading your development officers to the biggest and best donor prospects, and bringing your organization major gift success.
The other thing I would say is you don't do it alone. You have your executive director should have a portfolio. Oftentimes that's the board, but it could be another tier of major gift donors that you would support that person in cultivating, soliciting, stewarding, but they do the heavy lifting there.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. Hello, I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Diana Marquis, CFRE and founder of DMgroup Consulting. Hello, Diana. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
Good to be here and glad to join you.
So before we jump into talking about managing major gifts as a development director, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a bit about your career. Especially, everyone always wants to know, how did you get into fundraising in the first place? And then I'd love to know what you're doing right now as well.
Sure. I think for fundraisers of my generation, it's pretty much the same story. We kind of fell into it. It wasn't anything really planned. I didn't go after a degree like you can now. My first experience as a fundraiser, as a volunteer, was when I was working with a group of friends and we were mentoring young Latina high school girls. And we were just paying for it out of our own pocket. We weren't an organized nonprofit, but we were just doing our thing. It soon became clear that we couldn't keep doing that. We were all working women. We had families. We couldn't keep paying for this. So we said, God, we need to raise money. And no one knew how to do that. And I said, well, I'll look into it. I mean, how hard can it be, right? So I did, and it was hard. And we raised some money to keep our effort going for a while. But then my first professional fundraising job was with a local private university here in the Dallas area. And pretty much I talked my way into it. And maybe they really needed somebody. Maybe I really made a good case. I don't know. But they hired me. And so I worked there for a couple of years, primarily working with parents of students to increase their giving to the university. Now I've got about 20 plus years fundraising experience working with different nonprofits in the Dallas area. About, 7 or 8 years ago, a friend of mine invited me to join his new consulting firm. I was pretty much done with working for nonprofits one-on-one. So I accepted his offer, worked with him a few years, learned the consulting side. He was bought out by a larger firm, and I joined them for a while. It was not a good match. So I pretty much figured I can do this. I launched my own business January of 2020.
Oh, wow. Whoops.
Yeah. Oops is right.
How did it go?
Well, I'm still here. I think I'm pretty representative of people who say, oh, I'll be a consultant. And yes, I can do that work. But the business of being a consultant was something totally foreign to me. I was really lucky and blessed to have friends who supported me. I found good advice from different sources. My first client was a friend of mine in Fort Worth who had started her consulting business a year before me. She was my mentor. She gave me my first work, and it just kind of grew from there. What I also learned is I can't and don't want to do everything for everybody. So I think as a consultant, you learn to really narrow your focus on what it is you want to do. I had events on my website. I don't want to do events. No one asked me to do events. I don't do events. So that's off my website. But what I focus on is board training and education, annual fund planning, and strategic planning. And what my main work right now for a couple of my primary clients is I'm their fractional development director. So I'm really deep into their work. I like that. So that's what I'm doing.
It sounds great. And you made it. You made it out of the
Yay.
pandemic. So I'm curious, do you have a favorite story about landing a major gift anytime across your career that you were able to tell us about?
I do. And I'll never forget this woman. She was in my portfolio. I was at the Salvation Army, and I was hired there to form a major gifts team and to be the manager of this team here in Dallas-Fort Worth area. I did that. I had my own portfolio, looking through the records, trying to see who was who and who did what. I found this record and looked at it, and there wasn't much information. So I kind of did Google and, just do that basic kind of research. Found out that her husband had been chairman of the board of the Dallas Area Command, as it was called then, and, prominent businessman. And she made regular gifts. They were all designated to disaster relief. And I said, interesting. So I had a current address for her. She was widowed and living in a retirement community, very nice retirement community. Took me some different calls and little notes and stuff for her to finally meet with me. And when we did, she was like very wary, like, what do you want? She didn't say that. She was way too polite to say that. But she did say when we very first met, she said, I don't know why you're here. I've already made my gift. And it's like, oh, yes, you have. And thank you very much. Of course, I knew when her last gift was. So I was persistent in a very nice way. And I met with her several times and finally got some answers from her that she supported the Salvation Army because it was her husband's charity. She didn't really have a great affinity for it, but she was continuing to support his legacy. And she designated disaster relief because she felt that was the only way she knew where her money was going. I said, okay. At that time, all major donors were met by the area command officers. They were majors or captains in the Salvation Army hierarchy. We set up a meeting with the major who met with her, and very charming man. He knew what he was there for. He knew what he was doing. She knew what he was doing. I mean, it was all kind of like theater. But anyway, it went very well. He continued to meet with her as long as he was here because they do rotate out to other commands. And her gifts grew and they became unrestricted. I was the person behind the scenes making all that happen, which, I mean, that's how some places operate. I feel like that was my success story, even though I didn't do the ultimate ask with it, but it worked. And I'm fine with that. I have a background in production. So it's always like you put the best person forward to deliver the message. So that's what we did.
I love how you did it from start to finish. You were curious, you saw something in that record, then you pursued, then you were politely persistent. You found the right person for her, which I have had development officers be confused about that role. It is not always up to the development officer to make the ask and have the relationship. It's up to them to figure out who the right person is. That's a great story.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you for saying that. And it is. It's like, what is best for the organization? I always keep that in mind.
So for development directors who do it all, right? They don't have major gift portfolio, perhaps, or they are supposed to have one, but they don't have a dedicated gift officer. They're running the events. They're working with the executive director. They're doing the annual appeal. How do you recommend that they get started in major gifts or manage that or create and manage a portfolio?
I think what you described is where most development directors and managers are for nonprofits across the country. Most nonprofits are mid-sized to small. We're not all Salvation Army, American Red Cross, universities that can have not just a team, but huge departments. Most of us are in that where we are either a team of one or we have a very small team of just a handful of people. The first thing I would say for that manager or development director who is charged with handling major gifts, the very first thing is like, what is your major gift threshold? Do you know what that is? There's a way to calculate that. We won't get into that right now. You, the manager, director, don't want your ED or board chair or anybody else to say, oh, here, major gift threshold is $20,000 over at XYZ nonprofit. And it's like, well, that's great. Maybe that was ours, but I will calculate that based on our own database and let you know what it is. I feel very strongly you have to stand firm with like, what is that gift threshold for our organization? So first thing you find that out. So then you have something to base your searches on, your segmentations on, what's above that gift level and what's below that gift level. Obviously, those above that, then you have a smaller set. You can really analyze, do they give regularly? Is it one-time gift? Whatever it is. And that's the beginning of your portfolio. The other thing, if you're like a one-person shop or a very small shop, you have to be really selective. What is your own time limitations? What's your own capacity, your own energy level for doing everything else? plus major gifts. Maybe you can only handle 5 people or 10 people. Really be realistic about that and share that with your supervisor, your ED, whoever you might need. The other thing I would say is don't do it alone. You have your executive director should have a portfolio. Oftentimes that's the board, but it could be another tier of major gift donors that you would support that person in cultivating, soliciting, stewarding, but they do the heavy lifting there. The other thing I would say, and this is harder probably, is your board. And I would say they have portfolios, but I'm using air quotes as like, again, that's who do you know? Who can you open the door to? Using your board as a resource, using your executive director as a resource, even your program people, if you go on a call or anybody goes on a call, and I've seen this happen, I've done this myself, the prospective donor, they want to really hear what's going on. And who can say better than that frontline service provider or director to have a culture of philanthropy, where everybody's involved, where being involved in fundraising does not mean you do the ask necessarily, which is a hard lesson to get across. And then the last thing I would say, be very selective and really go deep into your time management. Block out your calendar. So every Tuesday, Thursday from 9 to 11, or whatever it is, I'm going to work on major gifts. Everybody knows that. It's on your calendar. Don't bother me. And that isn't always like when you're going to make the visits, but it could be when you're trying to schedule your visits or update your records or whatever it is. It's like show up to do that work. Honestly, it's not going to impact your other work because it's always going to be there. Those are the things. Know your own limitations, know who your donors are by segmenting your database and schedule your time. Block out your time so everybody knows what you're doing.
That's great advice. And I really like how what you said ties in nicely with your story, your donor story, because the executive director may or may not be into fundraising. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But you can do the heavy lifting so that if you do have someone who is prominent in the community or very high net worth and they are giving and showing all the signs, you can do the heavy work to set up the meeting, to prep your ED on, oh, here's what we're going to talk about today. And maybe to be the one that actually does make the ask if your ED won't do it in the meeting, but have that person there. So that fits in very nicely.
Yes, and the same with the chair. I mean, if there's a high net worth person, they don't want to meet with me or the manager. They want to meet with the chair of the board. They want to meet with the CEO. So again, it's knowing who is the right person to put in front of the donor.
That's great. And then it's in your portfolio, but not. You're kind of secondary on that. You also talked about in your donor story doing your own research. When you're a development director, it's got to be challenging to decide, like, when is it time to hire the big guns? Or when should I spend the money and purchase the wealth screening or buy a new tool or even outsource to someplace like it's Aspire? How do you make those kinds of decisions? Do you have any advice?
Well, I always have an opinion. I don't know if it's always good advice, but I will say I wish that every nonprofit leader understood the power of good research and the value of that investment. When there's not someone available for a position as researcher, there are some different ways to get some research done, and it has to be a team effort. And some other ways is maybe there's a volunteer who would be interested in doing research. Of course, with bringing in outside people, you provide the parameters. This is who you're going to look up. It's all confidential, etc. Or an intern that could do some basic research. And actually, college students, I'm guessing, still do research. So they are familiar with how to use the different tools. So I would consider that or those options as well as doing your own research or your team doing it. Whoever's doing the research, the very most basic thing every community has is a county appraisal district. At the very, very least, you can find out if someone owns a home and what that value is. That's like, okay, yes, they own a home in this zip code. That means X. So that's always like kind of a basic place to start. Most people are proud of their alma mater, so you can add that to your record. You mostly know if people are married or have a partner. The thing is that people don't often realize every little tidbit is helpful. Maybe not everything is equally valuable, but it's all pertinent to building that persona of that donor. So getting back to your question, when is it time to hire somebody or when do you know to do something like that? Part of that is planning. It's like if you're a small nonprofit, you can't afford a researcher on staff. So as you build your budget, let's say, okay, we're going to build into our budget the funds to bring on a consultant for 3 to 6 months to do research on all these records. So you look ahead, you try to be ready, or we're going to use Aspire, or we're going to use Donor Search, or plan ahead and do that. The other thing is, like, if you just absolutely can't do that and you just have to do it all yourself somehow or another. I've done this, like, way back in the day. It's like, okay, these are the 20 people, 50 people we really need to know in depth about. So you start asking people, you ask your board, do you know John Smith? Oh yeah, John and I play golf, blah, blah, blah. And you just take furious notes and get all that information in the database, or whoever else knows it. But people play golf together, or video games, or they went to the same school, or they all belong to the Rotary or the Chamber of Commerce. It's just asking those questions. Sometimes you can do that in a board meeting if you do it at like a little piece at a time, because you don't want to overwhelm anybody, much less your board, with 100 names, and they're just going to zone out and say, I don't know anybody. But if you kind of feed it a little bit at a time, you can build your information in your database. So it can be really tedious. I do enjoy fundraising. I also enjoy research. I think I might have been a librarian in another lifetime, but I like digging in and finding out information. I love your website, your resource page. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there I didn't even know about, and a lot of it is free and public record. The other thing that I've always been told, as long as I've been in fundraising, is you don't want to record anything on someone's record in your database that you don't want them to read. That helps guide, for many people, the information that you put in there. But I think it's worth the investment of using a service, hiring a consultant, at least a little bit periodically. My experience has been that you get a lot for what you pay a consultant to do in the research area.
You said two things that really resonated with me. The first was planning ahead. So, yes, even if you have extra money and you can purchase research, if you don't have a plan for how you're going to use it, if you're choosing the names ahead of time because these are people that you are actively engaging, that's a plan. That makes sense. And you're going to get a much better return on that investment that you make. So that's brilliant. And then the second one was the essentially peer review, because you will find out information from your board members and other people that we can never find online. The best stuff, right?
Right. I know we're talking about major gift donors, but I want to talk just for a second about foundation research. I work with a woman she's a grant writer. That's all she does. But what she does for her clients is once a year, she blocks out, I don't know, weeks or a month or something, where she will do in-depth research for her clients. I think it's the Foundation Directory Online probably is her main source, but there are others that I know she uses to update her pipelines for her different clients. So everybody knows, don't bother her in January or whenever it is. This is what she's going to be doing. She's done that for years. And I think that's really smart to dedicate the time. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm not going to distract it anything else. I really need to focus on this.
So before I let you go, I'm wondering if you have any last piece of advice or a resource, something like that, for development officers on how they can keep up with major gifts while doing everything else.
That's a hard one. And having been in that situation more than one time, I feel like I have a soapbox to stand on when I share this. First thing I would say is know your limitations. There's only 24 hours in a day. You should not be working 24 hours a day. So what is your time limitations and what's your energy level limitations? You can't go full force all the time. Be selective in identifying and choosing your major gift donors that you want to work with. And like you pointed out earlier, that kind of secondary or second tier that you are going to be providing kind of like the backroom support for your ED or board chair. So that's another little subset. Know who those people are, know you're going to focus on them, and have a plan for each of them, and be consistent. Again, that goes back, if you can only really effectively manage 10 or 20 major gift donors, don't add 50 to your portfolio. Just don't do it. So be consistent with those donors that you are working with. You've got to build that trust between you and them on behalf of the organization. And you develop that trust by being consistent. The other thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is to visually block out that time on your calendar to focus on your work. so that others can see what you're doing. It also is a reminder to you, is like, oh, I can't write this letter. I really need to focus on major gift for 2 hours or 3 hours, whatever it is. I'll do this other stuff later. I'm focusing on this right now. And that really helps. It's when you're planning your next meetings, you're making your phone calls, whatever it is that you're doing in major gift work. It's not all visits, but it's all the other stuff that goes with that. And the last part I would say is to document. Your phone calls, your emails, the newsletters they get, of course, the visits. This takes time. I know that. It's a pain. I know that. And you've got to do it, because if you have that information at your fingertips, that makes you look good for the donor. They expect you to know what they've told you last month, and they expect the person who comes after you to know that information. So you're doing yourself, I would say, a favor. You're doing your work, as you should, but you're also doing the next person that favor of keeping current records on those donors. And I have to say that, again, based on experience, donors get pretty put out when they have to repeat something that they assume you already know. So that's my advice.
Great advice. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. I loved it.
That was Diana Marquis, CFRE and founder of DMgroup Consulting. After hearing Diana speak just now, I realized I hadn't thought about the trend towards smaller major gift portfolio sizes also applying to smaller organizations who have solo development officers. But of course it does. The reasoning is the same. You don't want to do a mediocre job cultivating a larger group of prospects. You want to do a great job of cultivating the best prospects. I hope you enjoyed hearing Diana's donor story and her long-term perspective on fundraising as much as I did. Hey there! Do you manage a prospect research team, or were you newly hired as a prospect researcher? Then you'll be delighted to hear about the Institute's Career Agent Track. In this bundle of 4 courses, participants learn how to build great profiles, calculate capacity ratings, the basics of prospect identification and prospect management, ethics, and the fundamentals of analytics every team member needs to be skilled in. If you need to build the research skills of a fundraising intelligence asset like this, sign up today at member.prospectresearchinstitute.org/career agent.